Called Guitar, High Heel and Divorce, How Johnny Depp Became Johnny Depp and Not a Plumber from Florida. When we look at Johnny Depp as the drunken pirate, the Mad Hatter, or the chocolate factory owner with the stare of a maniac, we don't immediately guess. Behind it all is a kid who grew up surrounded by guitar strings, tears, and flying ashtrays. Yep, Johnny's childhood was the kind that would make any therapist start preparing a lifetime supply of antidepressants. Johnny was born on June 9, 1963, in Owensboro, Kentucky, a place where, according to legend, life ends before it even begins. But hey, at least it was cheaper than LA. His mom, Betty Sue, was a waitress with the energy of a rock band on speed, and his dad, John Christopher, was a civil engineer, a quiet man who vanished from the family photo album not long after. The family moved around more often than we change our Wi-Fi passwords. Childhood stability. Never heard of it. Johnny's first real-life course. How to survive when mum throws ashtrays and dad disappears in 78. His parents split up when he was 15. His father, ever the motivational speaker, told him, "You're the man of the house now," and promptly exited stage left. No manual provided. To cope, Johnny found his first love at 12, a guitar. That instrument became his safe space, his therapist, his best friend. He played for hours in his room, not because he was chasing fame, but because it was the only place where nobody was yelling at him. By 16, he figured school was cramping his style and walked out, leaving behind nothing but some chords and a slightly confused principle. Enter garage band life. His group, The Kids, yes, that's the name, not exactly deep branding, played wherever they could. Bars, backyards, maybe even Cousin Tina's wedding. The band didn't quite hit Billboard, but they did bring Johnny into the orbit of Nicolas Cage, and that's when the acting ball started rolling. But let's rewind to that sweet childhood. In court, Depp later recalled how Betty Sue had a flair for drama and footwear. She was known to discipline with stilettos or an ashtray to the head. Her parenting style was a blend of boot camp, soap opera, and Cold War interrogation. Johnny said the psychological pain was worse than any slap. Therapy? No, thanks. Just more guitar. Interestingly, despite the chaos, Johnny didn't go full rock bottom. No cults, no rehab, at least not yet, and no pyramid schemes. He turned inward, becoming the quiet, brooding, mysterious teen with the haunted eyes and a six-stringed best friend. Which, as it turns out, is exactly the type Hollywood loves, especially if the guy also has cheekbones and can talk like a 17th century gentleman at brunch. So, was Johnny born for the stage? Not really. He was born to survive chaos. The stage just gave him a place to make sense of it, and to finally explain that haircut. Before you label Johnny Depp weird, eccentric, or forever Jack Sparrow, remember this. The man lived through a childhood where every day was a mini-drama with a touch of absurdity. And yes, he still has that first guitar from age 12, because in Depp's world, guitars don't leave, yell, or throw shoes. Johnny Depp, the rock star who accidentally became a Hollywood sex symbol. Before Johnny Depp became Jack Sparrow, a chocolate psychopath, and a courtroom regular, he was just a guy with a guitar. Yes, the same type you probably had in your neighborhood, always starting a band and about to blow up on Spotify. Only Depp actually did blow up, but not the charts. He took over Hollywood instead. Born in Kentucky, Johnny quickly realized you couldn't become a rock star, a bohemian artist, or even a decent guitarist there. Too much corn, not enough studios. His family moved so often that little Johnny thought home was just a temporary concept. But when he turned 12, someone gave him a guitar, and that was it. Forget school, forget physics. His real education began with power chords and broken strings. While other kids dreamed of being firemen or astronauts, Johnny was in his room strumming rock and roll. Rumor has it, he once got so into it he forgot to come out of his room for dinner. For 3 days, his parents gave up. Well, at least he's not doing drugs, they thought. Yet. At 16, he waved goodbye to school, education, and any hope of a normal career. He dropped out because, in his own words, "I was too busy becoming a rock legend." His band was called The Kids because Nirvana didn't exist yet, and creativity was low on battery. They even moved to Los Angeles, the city where dreams go to die and unemployed musicians are born. For The Kids, both happened. They played in bars where the cockroaches outnumbered the audience, but Johnny kept going, he believed, even when all he could afford was instant noodles and discount beer, and just when it looked like this story was going to end in a garage full of broken amps, enter Nicolas Cage. Not with a guitar, but with an offer. "Hey, wanna be in a movie?" Johnny, being a rocker at heart, replied, "Why the hell not?" Next thing you know, he's in A Nightmare on Elm Street, getting eaten by a bed, pretty symbolic, considering how Hollywood would later devour his music career. From that moment on, he was doomed to sugary fame, red carpets, and scandals instead of bar tours and smoky venues. So yes, Johnny Depp was always a musician. It just so happened that all his guitar solos stayed behind the scenes, and on screen he became everything but himself. No Oscar dreams how Johnny Depp accidentally got into movies and never got out. If you think Johnny Depp always dreamed of becoming an actor, practiced "I'm the king of the world" in the mirror, and mailed his resume to Hollywood, relax. The truth is way sillier. He just didn't know what else to do. Music wasn't making him any money, bills were piling up, and the fridge echoed with emptiness. So, when fate, in the form of Nicolas Cage, threw him a lifeline, Johnny shrugged. "All right, let's try this movie thing." Yes, that Nicolas Cage, the master of facial gymnastics and weird roles, was Depp's unlikely guide into the world of acting. They met at a party. Where else would life-changing moments happen in the 80s? And Cage reportedly said something like, "Dude, you've got an interesting face. Try movies. You might like it." At first, Johnny scoffed. He was used to guitars, basement rehearsals, and gigs paid in warm beer. But then he thought, why not? Maybe they'll actually pay me. And just like that, off he went. His first film, A Nightmare on Elm Street. Yes, the one where Freddy Krueger slashes up teenagers. Poor Johnny got sucked into a bed and spat back out in a geyser of blood. The scene became iconic. And Depp, the guy with that face from the horror flick, he hadn't even planned on continuing, but the money came in, the offers followed, and suddenly life was heading uphill. And slightly downhill too, but that came later. Funny thing, Johnny was kind of embarrassed about his acting career at first. Compared to his dream of rock stardom, movies felt like a side hustle, like, just for now, until the band blows up. Spoiler alert, the band didn't. But the acting, that blew up, big time. Soon came small roles in indie dramas, then 21 Jump Street, and suddenly teenage girls were wallpapering their bedrooms with his face, and tabloids were hissing, "America's new sex symbol." And Johnny, he still thought it was temporary, maybe until the next tour with the band. But Hollywood doesn't let go, especially when your cheekbones are cover-worthy, and Depp, he kept getting offered role after role, and he kept saying yes, because, as he later admitted, it was just better than being an unemployed guitarist. So yes, Johnny Depp became an actor by accident. But considering he'd later play a mad pirate, a lunatic hatter, a drug addict, a vampire, a gangster, and basically everyone except himself, maybe fate actually knew what it was doing all along. How Johnny Depp became every schoolgirl's dream and quietly hated it. Before 1987, Johnny Depp was mostly known as that guy who got eaten by a bed in a horror movie. But everything changed when he became a cop. Not a real one, of course. A baby-faced undercover officer in the TV show 21 Jump Street. And suddenly, boom! Girls screamed, posters flew off the shelves, and Johnny's face was plastered across every teen magazine with headlines like "Eyes You Could Drown In" and 10 Reasons Why Johnny is the Perfect Boyfriend. But here's the irony. Johnny Depp absolutely hated the show. Picture this. You're a rock musician at heart, a bit anti-system, you wear leather jackets, smoke cheap cigarettes, and dream of edgy indie drama roles. And then, bam! You're turned into a glossy teen idol, sandwiched between George Michael and a fluffy polar bear on a Tiger Beat cover. Nightmare. Depp quickly realized he was trapped in an image. No one took him seriously. He was considered a pretty face, and he wanted to be, well, at least weird. While millions of teens swooned over him, Johnny daydreamed about quitting the show. He even admitted he tried to intentionally mess up scenes to get fired. He once said, "I felt like a mannequin, just a face they were selling." Not exactly the dream for a guy who wanted to be a guitarist, but ended up as a primetime heartthrob with a plastic badge. As the network celebrated Johnny as their golden boy, he was quietly losing his mind. The scripts annoyed him, the haircut annoyed him, and the fact that he couldn't play anything truly bizarre annoyed him even more. He didn't want to be a prince. He wanted to be, say, a cannibal in a black and white film about dental horror, but instead, week after week, he played the perfect guy in a blazer. Yet the show did its job. It made Johnny Depp a household name, and when he finally escaped, Hollywood was already lined up with offers. But this time, Johnny had made a decision. "I'm not playing by your rules anymore." Instead of picking standard leading man roles, he began choosing strange characters: anarchists, weirdos, introverts, and general oddballs. And that's what made him iconic. But it all started with that one TV show he couldn't stand, and that made him a star. How Johnny Depp started cutting hedges and hearts, the Tim Burton encounter that made him lovably weird. After Johnny Depp escaped the glossy prison of 21 Jump Street, he could have gone the normal Hollywood route, romantic comedies, cozy sweaters, and lovingly staring at Sandra Bullock in autumn-themed lighting. But luckily, or unluckily, he crossed paths with Tim Burton, a man who probably grew up reading bedtime stories where Cinderella was a vampire and the Tooth Fairy worked part-time in a haunted asylum. Burton didn't just see a pretty face with sad eyes, he saw the perfect hero for his next twisted fairy tale. Thus, Edward Scissorhands was born, a story about a guy with scissors instead of hands and a never-ending conflict with suburban Karens. Johnny dove into the role instantly. Word on the street is he didn't even need to act. He just tapped into his teenage loneliness, added some eyeliner, stopped blinking, and boom, cinema gold. The movie became a hit. Not because people suddenly wanted blades for fingers, but because viewers realized, wait, this dude from those cheesy teen posters can actually act. And he's weird, but in a good way. And thus began a new Depp era, the freak era. Johnny was no longer that cute guy next door. He was now the scarred angel in leather who stares into the void and trims topiaries into dinosaurs. Directors started calling him only if the script involved sadness, shadows, or a character with a tragic haircut. The Depp-Burton duo became so inseparable, it felt like Tim couldn't even sip black coffee without thinking, what if Johnny played the mug? And somehow Johnny did. He became everything. A chocolate factory-loving oddball, a pale vampire with feelings, a mad hatter on the verge of a nervous breakdown. At one point, it honestly seemed like they were one soul split into two bodies with different hair products. And to think, it all started with a silent gardener with scissors for hands, trimming bushes and simultaneously carving into the audience's hearts. That's when Johnny realized, the weirder I am, the more they love me. And from then on, he didn't just embrace weirdness, he collected it like trophies. So no, Depp didn't just play strange, he became Hollywood's most elegant oddball. And Tim Burton? He was just the eccentric wizard who saw a tortured rock musician and said, "You know what you need? a role where you can't touch anyone and speak in 5-word sentences. And Johnny said yes. Thank God. How Johnny Depp became a pirate and couldn't get off the ship. When Disney approached Johnny Depp with the idea of playing Captain Jack Sparrow, they probably expected something along the lines of, "Good day, sir, our ship is in distress." Instead, they got a drunken rock star in a tricorn hat who spoke like he'd just stepped off a Vivian Westwood runway while searching for rum. At the time, the studio had no idea Depp was about to launch a full-on revolution. He wasn't inspired by classic Hollywood heroes. He was channeling Keith Richards. Yep, Captain Jack Sparrow is basically a pirate in heels, with a touch of heroin chic, eyeliner, and inner chaos. When Disney saw the first screen tests, executives panicked. "What are these weird gestures?" they asked, but it was too late. The camera loved it, and soon so did the world. Pirates of the Caribbean didn't just become a successful franchise, it was a cultural explosion. Jack Sparrow became a meme before memes were even a thing. Kids wanted to be him, adults wanted to drink with him, and the studio just wanted to quietly count their billions. And Johnny started drowning in success. In a good way. His costume alone cost as much as a Moscow apartment, and for each new sequel, he was making sums so enormous they were difficult to say out loud without choking. He became the highest-paid actor in the world. Not for Hamlet or some deep indie drama, but for playing a drunk, mascara-wearing pirate who chased rum and spoke in riddles. But there was a flip side. Depp became so immersed in the role that, at some point, no one could tell if he was playing Sparrow or if Sparrow had fully taken over. He started showing up at interviews with that same strange walk, dropping cryptic quotes as if it were the final act, and the credits were already rolling. Everything blended together. Feathers, rings, personal drama, and billion-dollar contracts. With success also came exhaustion. Each new film in the franchise felt slightly more forced. Jack was still a fan favorite, but starting to look tired, like not only had he run out of rum, but also out of fresh ideas. Meanwhile, Johnny was living his own pirate life. Yachts, scandals, skull collections, and wine bottles more expensive than sports cars. But no matter what critics say, it was Jack Sparrow that carved Johnny's name into cinematic history forever. He didn't just play a pirate, he became one, and like a true buccaneer, he sailed off with all the treasure chests. How Johnny Depp lost a marriage but won TikTok. If someone had told Johnny Depp back in the early 2000s, "Hey, in 20 years you'll be the biggest meme on the internet, and people will be arguing over who's more toxic, you or your ex," he probably would have laughed, picked up his guitar, and walked off into the sunset. But alas, life turned out to be less of a movie and more of a black comedy courtroom thriller. His marriage to Amber Heard started like a fairy tale. Red carpets, passionate looks, interviews filled with, "We found each other." Everything seemed perfect until tabloid headlines started whispering things like, "Depp smashed phone against wall," and "Amber wore bruised look makeup." Thus began the scandal of the century, where no one quite understood. Is this real life or a brilliantly twisted HBO pilot? Court hearings, witness testimonies, audio recordings? And of course, the now legendary bed incident. Yes, an actual courtroom discussed the mystery of a certain bathroom activity left in their bedroom. As cringe as that sounds, that was the moment the public stopped seeing the trial as a tragedy and started watching it like a live-action dark comedy. Live streams, TikTok edits, YouTube compilations titled Best Depp Court Moments. It all became a new genre, a legal reality show with ratings higher than Game of Thrones. And Johnny? Johnny sat in that courtroom like he was at a film premiere, tailored suit, zen demeanor, clever comebacks to Amber's lawyers, and quotes like, "Yes, I gave her a knife. Everyone has their hobbies." The internet exploded. From washed-up drunk with a dark past, he transformed into a misunderstood victim, with eyeliner and heartbreak. People were lining up, digitally and emotionally, to hold his hand, or at least his ring finger. Memes, t-shirts with courtroom quotes, musical remixes of his testimony. It all quite literally resurrected Johnny's career. Even Dior didn't waste a second. Wait, he's a fan favorite again. Quick, renew the contract. And suddenly there he was, back on billboards, not as a grunge heartthrob with a guitar, but as the face of male dignity in the age of toxic love. He won the trial, and while the victory was legal, it was also wildly public. Johnny, however, seemed only interested in peace, and maybe a bottle of wine, preferably one that hadn't been smashed during an argument. He didn't go on a media tour or write a tell-all book. He just hit the road with his guitar, off to places where lawyers don't follow and cameras don't shout in your face. And the public still chants, "Justice for Johnny." Because in a world where everyone's acting, he at least showed us his truth, even if it came with smudged eyeliner and a guitar solo. How Johnny Depp moved to France, sold his soul to Dior, and became a heartthrob again, and a marketer's dream. After the courtroom battles, memes, justice chants, and TikTok ovations, Johnny Depp could have taken a break. You know, like all tired heroes do. Buy an island, launch a candle line, or start a YouTube channel with dramatic revelations. But nope, he made a king's move. He moved to France and signed the most expensive contract in Dior's history. Yes, really. The very same man once accused of abuse and alcoholism became the face of Sauvage perfume, which, let's admit, is symbolically brilliant. Apparently Dior decided, okay, if this guy survived everything, he's definitely resilient. We want that. The contract? $1 million. For a cent, for a wild, rugged, time-weathered face, and for the legend, because no matter how you feel about him, Johnny isn't just an actor. He's a character of the era, perpetually tipsy-looking, but perfectly sober when it comes to staying iconic. Meanwhile, he settled into a French estate with vineyards, fields, castles, and a gentle air of decadence. He hosted artists, rockers, and aristocrats, the kind who also once dabbled in wine, scandals, and Dior cologne. And he looked like time had stopped for him. Rings on every finger, sunglasses the size of saucers, scarves in the heat. But in a good way, like a man who's no longer rushing, no longer explaining, and no longer playing anyone but himself. Sometimes he'd perform on stage with his guitar. Sometimes he just stared out the window, sipping wine and reading Baudelaire, or pretending to. Either way, the film offers started rolling in again. First came the French. They cast him as King Louis XIV. Ironic, right? Yesterday, a defendant in court. Today, a monarch in a powdered wig. Then Hollywood started sniffing around, cautiously, with one eyebrow raised, but clearly thinking. The public forgave him, and if the public forgave him, we can start cashing in again. Because, as history shows, in Hollywood, anything is possible if you've got enough charisma and decent hair. And so, Johnny's back in the game. No more breakdowns, no more handcuffs, no more courtroom drama, just perfumes, wine, a French chateau, and the status of a living legend who has survived it all. Fame, downfall, scandal, trials, and fame again. And if you ask how he pulled it off, the answer is simple. He just stayed himself, with all his quirks, drama, eyeliner, and rock and roll soul. When you're weird and so is your director, how Johnny Depp and Tim Burton found each other and never let go. If Johnny Depp had never met Tim Burton, he might have just remained that handsome guy with cheekbones sharp enough to slice salami. But fate, and probably a shared love of black clothes, the undead, and melancholic eyes, brought them together. And ever since, they haven't let go of their gothic embrace. Their first collaboration, Edward Scissorhands, a film where Johnny walks around with the face of a sad raccoon and scissors instead of hands. Great start, honestly. audiences were either enchanted or deeply confused. But from that point on, Johnny learned the ultimate lesson. The weirder he is on screen, the more people adore him. And Tim figured out that if Johnny's not in the frame, the film is basically missing its soul. Then came Sleepy Hollow, where Depp plays a squeamish detective afraid of blood. Yes, really. And then, the floodgates opened. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, where Willy Wonka looks like Michael Jackson wandered into a dreamland barbershop, Corpse Bride, Sweeney Todd, and Alice in Wonderland, where Depp seemingly rolled into makeup, drank 2 gallons of coffee, and declared, "I'll just do Crazy Eyes the whole time." And it totally worked. Audiences loved their duo. They were like 2 misfits who'd escaped from a carnival of freaks and decided that all of Hollywood should now be shot in shades of grey, purple, and tears. And to be fair, there was magic in that. Every project they touched felt like an invitation inside someone else's head. Strange, beautiful, haunting. Sometimes a little boring, but always stylish. Of course, there were flops too, like Dark Shadows, which wanted to be funny but just turned out dark. But even in failure, Depp and Burton looked like they couldn't care less. What mattered was that they were together again. One mumbling, "Let's add more spiders," and the other saying, "Can I be pale with crooked teeth?" And that, honestly, is the essence of Johnny. He's not chasing blockbusters, he's chasing roles where he can be as not of this world as possible. And with Tim Burton, he found someone who not only gets that, but turns it into gothic, art house diamonds. Their partnership is like 2 nerds falling in love in a dim room, not for everyone, but for the right people. A cinematic romance. Johnny Depp and his rock band, how an actor tired of Hollywood became a vampire with a guitar. At some point, even Johnny Depp got bored of being Johnny Depp. I mean, how long can one man suffer on screen, wear wigs, and whisper dramatically? So he decided to reconnect with who he was before Captain Jack Sparrow happened. Just a regular guy with a guitar and a lifelong love for rock. That's how a band with a terrifying name was born. Hollywood Vampires. Why vampires? Well, first of all, it sounds rock and roll. Secondly, the band members look like they've spent eternity on tour with Led Zeppelin and were only recently awakened with the phrase, "We're going back on the road." Depp formed the group with actual legends, Alice Cooper and Aerosmith guitarist Joe Perry. So if you thought this was going to be some "let's do an acoustic cover in a coffee shop" situation, think again. This isn't about coziness. It's about leather jackets, smoke machines, screaming amps, and guys in their 60s still absolutely shredding. On stage, Depp doesn't try to act. He's a musician. Serious, focused, wearing dark sunglasses, his guitar sounds like the hoarse cry of a teenager who just found out Depp is playing Willy Wonka again. Sometimes he sings. Sometimes he just lurks in the shadows, silently whispering, "I was always a musician. Hollywood just got in the way." Their songs are mostly dark, covers of rock classics, mixed with a few original tracks steeped in gloom and introspection. Everything a man with a tragic gaze, a dozen rings, and a history of lawsuits could ask for. But the audience eats it up, because watching Johnny in a movie is one thing. Hearing him rip a live guitar solo under vintage stage lights is something else entirely. And there's therapy in it too. After all the scandals, the rumors, and the endless "she said, he said," Depp seems to have found a way to speak without speaking, through music, through vibration, through sound that doesn't judge. It just howls in your ears and says, "I'm still here, damn it." Sure, he didn't become a rock icon on the level of Kurt Cobain or Bowie, but honestly, he never needed to. He's not playing for fame. He plays because he has to, because in every note of his solo, there's a silent scream. This is me, the real me, no makeup, no script, with a guitar, not a sword, in leather, not a wig. From Scandal to Chateau, how Johnny Depp ditched Hollywood, moved to France, and became a reclusive, legendary grandpa. When you're over 60, have been plastered across every news channel, turned into a meme multiple times, and your wig has seen more courtrooms than red carpets, it's probably time to retire. Or at least hit pause. Johnny Depp got the memo and made a move worthy of a king. He bought an estate in France and disappeared, gracefully. These days he doesn't pop up at premieres or late-night talk shows. He lives like a character from a dusty old novel, in a chateau with vineyards, a private chef, and enough wine to flood a small village. And let's be honest, he probably has a different glass for every day of the week. Sometimes he ventures out in public, with a scarf around his neck, oversized sunglasses, and the expression of someone who just reread The Count of Monte Cristo and nodded in approval. Occasionally he still performs on stage. Other times he just sits on his terrace with a cigarette and a look that says, "I'm done now." He's not rushing anymore, not chasing roles, not explaining himself. He lives like someone who's seen it all, the beautiful, the bizarre, and the absolutely insane. And now just wants peace, music, and no more court summons in the mail. The internet keeps guessing. Is he okay? Why isn't he in movies? Has he vanished? Meanwhile, he's just living, quietly, without drama, because he can, because he wants to. Because if you've spent 30 years playing emotionally wounded weirdos, you probably deserve to sit still for a bit, glass of wine in hand, and not pretend to be anyone else. And guess what? He paints now. Yep, paints. Sells his art for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Portraits of friends, legends, and former colleagues. Some might say that's a little self-indulgent. Others would argue, if I carried Hollywood on my back for 40 years, I'd paint myself too, and hang it in the bathroom. That's Johnny now, a man who survived Hollywood, stayed himself, walked through fire, heartbreak, fame, and loneliness, and came out iconic again. But this time without all the noise. No red carpet acrobatics, no endless interviews, just life, on his own terms. While others dance on TikTok for hearts and views, he watches the sunset over his vineyard and smiles under his moustache, because he knows he's done it all already, and now he's just being. Pirates of the Caribbean and the bank account, where Johnny Depp's millions went. They say money can't buy happiness, but Johnny Depp clearly decided to test that theory. Not just test it, but absolutely demolish his bank account with such flair that even Hollywood accountants started lighting candles. Let's start with the big one. A private island in the Bahamas. Not a summer house in the Hamptons, not a villa in Bali, an actual island. There, among the palm trees, Johnny wandered barefoot contemplating life, or maybe just wondering how much more wine he could order for $30,000 a month, which is apparently how much he spent on his wine habit. Considering he wore scarves in 95-degree heat, the wine must have been excellent. Then there's the $30 million yacht, which he renamed, redecorated, and repainted so many times even GPS got confused. Fun fact, he eventually sold it to J.K. Rowling. The transition from wizards to pirates, smooth as rum on the rocks. And how do you get from one of your 14 houses to another? That's right. You don't Uber, darling. You fly in your own private Gulfstream jet, because who even flies business class when you can sip champagne at 40,000 feet above peasant problems? Let's not forget the French chateau with a vineyard, which he transformed into an art house dream. Part Provence, part existential crisis, with a full-time chef, of course. There, legend says, he hosted candlelit dinners with live music and deep conversations about the meaning of life. Or maybe just about which new guitar to buy, because he had over 70 of them. Guitar collection, check.car collection, obviously collection of bank alerts saying, "You've exceeded your limit?" Probably also check. But the crowning jewel, launching Hunter S. Thompson's ashes into the sky via a custom-built cannon. For $3 million, some people burn through money. Johnny Depp literally fired it into the atmosphere, as they say, to each their own. And here comes the real question. Was it madness? Or just the art of living? Because Depp isn't just an actor, He's a genre. He didn't spend money. He curated a myth around himself, a myth made of luxury, decadence, and a light fog of whiskey. Of course, it all ended in lawsuits, debt, and headlines like, "Where did Johnny Depp's fortune go?" Meanwhile, he was probably sitting in one of his castles, sipping something vintage, thinking, well, it was fun while it lasted. The Pirate of the Archipelago, how Johnny Depp decided to rule the seas. While most people save up for a tiny summer house or a cramped one-bedroom apartment with a balcony, Johnny Depp went a different route. He bought himself an island. And then another one. Because obviously, if you've played Captain Jack Sparrow, you don't just deserve a compass, you deserve at least a few pieces of land in the middle of the ocean. Back in 2004, tired of red carpets, loud parties, and probably neighbors with power drills, Johnny bought Little Hall's Pond Kai, a private island in the Bahamas. Price tag? About 3.6 million euros, or roughly $4 million. What's on the island? Turquoise water, white sand, palm trees, and absolute silence. The perfect place to practice yoga, forget about Marvel scripts, and just sit in a straw hat contemplating the emptiness of Hollywood. But one tropical dream wasn't enough. Johnny figured it wouldn't hurt to conquer Greece, or at least a piece of it. That's how Strogolo Island in the Aegean Sea ended up in his collection. Another 4 million euros gone from the bank account. Let's just hope he earned some frequent flyer miles along the way. And these weren't just impulsive millionaire buys. This wasn't a whim. It was more like a personal escape plan, a rebellion against paparazzi, producers, and exes with lawyers. A place where he could be just Johnny, with a glass of red wine, a hat, and a guitar. Rumor has it that on his Bahamian island, he even named beaches and coves after his loved ones. One named after his daughter, Lily Rose. Adorable? Absolutely. A little eccentric? How else would you expect Johnny Depp to live? At this point, all we need is for him to release his own map of the world, where instead of continents we have the United Realms of Depp, and instead of capitals, wine cellars. Of course, owning islands isn't just romantic. It's about maintenance, staff, logistics, protection from random tourists on paddleboards, and coconuts that need harvesting. But is that a problem when you once had $650 million and genuinely believed that wine was an investment? These days, maybe he doesn't vacation there as often. Maybe the islands just sit there quietly, like tropical trophies, reminders of a time when Jack Sparrow didn't just rule the screens, but also bought pieces of earth like souvenirs from a gift shop. But one thing's for sure, very few people on this planet can say they own their own seas, and Johnny, he can, because being a pirate, that's not a role, it's a lifestyle, and honestly, that's Depp in a nutshell, living in a way that people will talk about you forever, so that each million spent sounds like a new act in a play called Life Johnny's Edition. How to blow through $650 million and still be a legend, the financial saga of Johnny Depp. If you think you know how to spend money, just take a look at Johnny Depp. He didn't just go shopping, he orchestrated economic hurricanes. At one point he made $650 million, and guess what's left? Right, debts, lawsuits, and a wine collection worth more than the GDP of a small country. Let's break it down. Johnny wasn't one of those people who stashes paychecks under a mattress or watches webinars on financial literacy. He spent with flair. He bought properties by the dozen, 14 houses totaling more than $75 million, including a castle in France, a horse farm in Kentucky, and an island. Yes, that one in the Bahamas we've already talked about. Somewhere in there are probably a few homes he bought by accident. Maybe drunk, maybe just for the vibes. How about the car collection? Over 45 luxury vehicles, some of which he probably never even started. It's just nice to know you have a vintage Rolls-Royce if the paparazzi apocalypse hits. But the most legendary part, $70 million spent on vintage wine. Let's say that again together. $70 million on wine. This isn't investing. This is flying to Mars in a slightly tipsy state. And Johnny himself once said, It's insulting to call my wine spending alcoholism. It was a serious wine business. Well, if drinking counts as business, then no further questions, Your Honor. Add to that a massive entourage. 40 staff members, including a chef, masseuse, assistants, security, and possibly a shaman to cleanse the house's energy. That little setup cost around $2 million per month. Yes, per month. I wouldn't be surprised if he had a dog that flew first class. Then came endless lawsuits with former managers, agents, and Amber Heard. The money burned faster than you could say, "Objection." And while Johnny fought for his truth, his bank account steadily melted like a wax figure in the sun. But you know what's actually kind of amazing? He's still a star. Despite all that financial chaos, he didn't turn into some grumpy old guy in a tweed jacket grumbling about taxes. He remained that same pirate, only now his treasure is mortgaged and his ship is parked outside a law firm. While others read up on budgeting tips, Johnny Depp reads wine labels. And even when he loses millions, he does it with style. Because being a legend isn't about your account balance, it's about how you live, how you burn it all, and then sell an interview about how you lost everything. His own Hollywood, how Johnny Depp bought half of LA and still wondered where to sleep. If you thought it was cool to own one cozy villa somewhere in Beverly Hills, then you're clearly not Johnny Depp. This man didn't just buy a house, he basically bought an entire neighborhood. Literally, 14 estates, including 5 penthouses in the Hollywood Hills. And that's just what the press knows about. How much did it cost him? $75 million or $85 million, if that hurts more to hear. And Johnny is clearly not the kind of guy who does things with a financial advisor whispering in his ear. He was snatching up houses like they were cans of soda on clearance. Oh, another pretty mansion, I'll take it, actually, make it 2, just in case. What did he do with them? No one knows. He lived in some, didn't even step into others. One of them was rumored to be his hat closet, another a home for his guitar collection, and one was supposedly used for a non-stop party zone, just in case the Rolling Stones or Jim Carrey showed up unannounced. The real kicker: 5 penthouses in a single building in Los Angeles. Not because he needed them, just because, well, what if guests didn't want to share a bathroom, or maybe he felt like sleeping in a new wing every night? Brilliant logic, really. You'd think with such a real estate arsenal he'd have no worries. But no, court documents featured phrases like unpaid mortgage interest, inability to cover property maintenance, and even unknown disappearance of certain assets. Maybe he just forgot where one of his houses was. It happens. Now add a private island in the Bahamas, a castle in France, and a horse farm in Kentucky. The question isn't, why did he buy it? It's why not? When you're Captain Jack Sparrow, you don't rent, you conquer. But with time and legal bills came some kind of awakening, or something close to it. He sold a few things, mortgaged others, and probably just stopped thinking about the rest. After all, it's not about the possessions, it's about the memories, right? Although memories don't come with property tax bills. Captain Scandal: How Johnny Depp Became a Wife-Beating Pirate. He used to be the darling of millions, scruffy, romantic, with the eyes of a sad puppy. Women dreamed of him, men wanted to be like him. But one day, the world flipped upside down, and Johnny Depp found himself not in the trailer for Pirates of the Caribbean 6, but at the center of one of the biggest scandals of the decade, with a title not of Oscar winner, but of wife beater. It all started when the British tabloid The Sun, known for its love of scandals, labeled Depp as the husband who beats his wife. According to them, the romance with Amber Heard wasn't a love story, but rather an action thriller with psychological horror elements. And Johnny, being Johnny, didn't just sit back. He went full vigilante mode and sued them. After all, who wants to go down in Hollywood history as that actor who beat his wife while playing Jack Sparrow? The trial lasted for weeks. And no, they weren't discussing movie scripts, but fights, screaming matches, broken bottles, and human feces. Yes, really. The London courtroom basically turned into a reality show. Audio recordings, text messages, mental breakdowns, scars, and even poop-throwing incidents were dissected in public view. You couldn't make this stuff up. So what was the verdict? The judge found 14 out of 16 alleged abuse incidents described by Amber to be substantially true. In other words, to put it plainly, yeah, it really looks like you did it, bro. The judge essentially said, I'm not going to say you didn't hit her, which in legal and PR terms is like saying, you're officially tainted. What followed wasn't just firing, it was a Hollywood implosion. Disney distanced itself like Johnny had contracted a PR plague. Warner Brothers politely asked him to exit Fantastic Beasts, and the film industry, which loves second chances, unless you're a man accused of domestic violence, suddenly became very hard of hearing when it came to Depp's name. Fans split into two camps. Some burned Amber's posters, others burned Johnny's. The internet exploded with hashtags, petitions, lip-reading analysis of court videos. It wasn't politics dividing the world anymore, it was a toxic celebrity breakup. Since then, Depp's been living with the Scarlet Letter. Of course, he's not in jail, but his reputation is like an old pirate ship in the Caribbean, still floating, but full of holes. When love turns into a courtroom series, Johnny vs. Amber Infinite Season. When Johnny Depp married Amber Heard, no one imagined they wouldn't just be a couple. They'd go down in history as the main characters in the most dramatic, toxic, and absurd courtroom show of the decade. Seriously, Hollywood pales in comparison. This wasn't a marriage, it was a full-on Netflix drama with an R rating. So first, the wedding. Beautiful, glossy, with outfits, photo shoots, and champagne. Then, a lightning-fast divorce, and after that, a full-blown war. Amber said, "He hit me." Johnny responded, "You're lying. Here's a $50 million lawsuit." And the roller coaster began. The 2022 American trial wasn't just a legal process, it was theater. No, it was a circus with costumes, tears, laughter, TikTok analysts, and an army of lawyers who looked like they'd rehearsed their speeches in Hollywood. The hearings were streamed live, like a UFC match, only instead of punches, words instead of blood, tears, sometimes from Amber, sometimes from Johnny, sometimes from the lawyers, who seemed to have been cast for roles like good prosecutor and evil defense. Naturally, the internet exploded. You couldn't keep up with the memes. Every day, a new episode. Amber cries, Johnny cracks a joke. She, restrained and tragic. He, smirking with a mug that had something sarcastic written on it. Everyone was sharing clips, analyzing body language, writing essays, as if this wasn't about two adults who couldn't handle a normal divorce, but about a national event on par with the moon landing. The outcome, the court awarded Depp $15 million in damages, and Amber $2 million from her counterclaim. It looked like a win for Johnny, and fans cheered. Justice has prevailed. Amber, looking like a reality show finalist, said, "This is the end, and the start of a new chapter." What chapter? Unclear. Possibly titled How to Pay Off $15 million. The scandal became a cult. Some were writing songs, others were selling T-shirts with Team Johnny printed on them, and some were arguing in the comment sections like their lives depended on it. In the end, we all realized that in today's world, you don't need blockbusters, just a messy celebrity divorce with tears, bruises, and a YouTube stream. The moral of the story? Never marry someone who can act better in court than they do in a movie, especially if you're an actor yourself. Captain Without a Ship, how Hollywood threw Depp overboard. Imagine, you're Johnny Depp. You've got millions of fans, kids dress up as Jack Sparrow for Halloween, and Disney earns billions off your drunken pirate swagger, and suddenly, bam, a call from the studio. "Johnny, we don't need you anymore. Talk to your lawyers. Bye-bye." That's how careers are decided in Hollywood, not through scripts, but through press releases. It all began with the courtroom drama between Depp and Heard. While lawyers argued about who hit whom, studios quietly drew crosses over Depp's career. Warner Brothers were the first to throw a lifeline straight at his face. They politely asked Johnny to step away from the role of Grindelwald in Fantastic Beasts. Nothing personal, they said, just reputation, market risk, fans, and scandal. Oh sure, totally not personal. Then came Disney, the very same folks who built an entire industry of rides and Lego sets around Captain Jack decided, no smoke without fire, and gave Jack a one-way ticket off the ship. The fifth Pirates of the Caribbean movie, without Jack. Maybe with a new heroine, maybe with no plot at all. But most importantly, no Depp. The world went ballistic. Fans launched petitions, posted gifs of drunken Sparrow stumbles, and cried, "You can't fire the captain from his own ship." But Disney and Warner Brothers were unmoved. We're a family brand, PG-13, image is everything. Johnny didn't stay silent. Like a true rock star, he said, "To hell with your Hollywood," and hit the road with his guitar, collected European Film Awards, starred in low-budget indie art films, and became a cult hero of the cancelled. He stopped getting red carpet invites, but in the hearts of his fans, he transformed into an iconic outlaw. Johnny disappeared from blockbusters, and somehow became even more of a rock star than when he was snorting coke in Blow. The moral of the story? In Hollywood, you're a legend until you start losing in court, and if your name is Jack Sparrow, just remember, even the coolest captain can be left without a helm once the PR sharks smell blood. Johnny, dogs, and a dash of international crime. When Hollywood barks at quarantine, Hollywood isn't just red carpets and glitter, it's also fluffy little crimes, especially if you're Johnny Depp and you happen to have a couple of adorable Yorkshire Terriers with a taste for flying private. What could possibly go wrong? The answer, everything. In 2015, Australia discovered that, alongside its kangaroos and venomous spiders, it now had an uninvited guest, Captain Jack Sparrow himself, accompanied by two undeclared four-legged passengers, Pistol and Boo. And no, this wasn't a movie plot, it was real drama, with Depp and Amber Heard starring as, brace yourself, canine smugglers. Not of drugs, mind you, of dogs. But in the world of biosecurity, that's practically the same thing. Australian officials were furious. A country where a banana can cause border panic suddenly found itself dealing with a threat far more dangerous. Celebrity poochers crossing the border without visas or vaccination records. The Minister for Agriculture solemnly declared, "Either your dogs leave the country, or we'll have to put them down." Yep, welcome to Australia. While the world frantically Googled Pistol and Boo, Amber was busy submitting fake documents, smiling awkwardly in court, and eventually pleading guilty. She was fined, and the world got a viral video masterpiece, Johnny and Amber, faces grim as funerals, reading a scripted apology into a camera like they were hostages. It was so dramatic, one expected Johnny to start personally apologizing to kangaroos next. The actors stated they respected Australia's sovereignty and loved its people. But it was too late. Memes, angry headlines, online mockery, it all came crashing down like an avalanche. The Australian press gleefully grilled Depp as if he were some newly discovered invasive species. And yet, to be honest, the whole circus only boosted Johnny's public image. How could you not sympathize with a man threatened with dog euthanasia just because he loved his furry kids too much? This was the moment the world didn't see a Hollywood monster, but a guy who maybe just broke a few rules for love. Moral of the story. Next time you try importing anything alive into Australia, whether it's a dog, parrot, or ex-wife, maybe ask customs first. And if you're Johnny Depp, be ready. Even a dog's bark can make global headlines. Johnny Depp and the blues of borrowing, when rock and roll turns into a courtroom gig. You'd think that after the dramatic divorce, the endless courtrooms, the dog smuggling fiasco, and years of tabloid chaos, Johnny Depp had earned the right to just strum a few chords in peace. And strum he did. Alongside guitarist Jeff Beck, he released the album 18, pouring his rock and roll soul into it with a track boldly titled Sad Motherfuckin' Parade. But the entertainment world isn't your buddy's garage jam session, and if you decide to throw a few lines into a song that you didn't exactly come up with yourself, well, you better be damn sure they don't belong to someone else, because that's when folklore experts start crawling out of the archives, armed with paperwork and very serious expressions. Enter 2022. Our dear Captain Jack Sparrow wasn't steering a ship, but facing legal heat, this time for plagiarism. A folklorist came forward, claiming that the lyrics used in the song were taken from one H. Bowman, an African-American inmate recorded in the 1960s as part of an oral storytelling archive. And according to the accuser, you can't just rip words from the past and slap them onto a rock track, not even if you're Johnny Depp and you've survived worse. Naturally, Depp didn't sit this one out. His legal team fired back with a counterclaim, essentially saying, "Hey, these aren't copyrighted lyrics, they're part of oral tradition." According to them, folklore belongs to the people, especially if that person happens to be a famous actor with a guitar, a studio, and a rebellious streak. What followed was a surreal standoff. On one side, the ghost of a forgotten inmate echoing from the past. On the other, Depp performing his lines like they were born from his own heartbreak. And somewhere in between, a courtroom trying to figure out who actually owns vintage American pain. Naturally, fans were split. Some shouted, "It's not plagiarism, it's just the blues." Others wagged fingers. "Shame on you, Johnny! How dare you steal from a guy who never even made it to the age of Spotify?" And Depp? He didn't seem too fazed. If anything, he looked mildly amused, because nothing reinforces your status as a true rock star, quite like being accused of stealing someone else's blues. Just remember, Johnny, when you dig into folklore, folklore might just dig back, and it might bring lawyers and headlines with it.